Good afternoon, and welcome to our live webcast of Open Book, Open Mind Online with Sandra Cisneros talking about her new book, Martita, I Remember You. I'm Ariel Zeitlin, one of the Montclair Public Library's librarians, and first I'd just like to draw your attention to the Q&A button. If you're using a computer or a smartphone, it's at the bottom of your screen. If you're using a tablet, it's at the top of your screen. That's how you can send us your questions for the Q&A, and it's also how you can ask for live tech help from my librarian co-host, Selwa Shami, at any time during the webcast. Now, I'd like to introduce Sheila Boyd, a member of the board of our Library Foundation. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Ariel. We're so happy you're here for another virtual webcast of Open Book, Open Mind. I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Montclair Public Library Foundation. We're a group of your friends and neighbors, and our mission is to raise money to fund offerings that make our library so special. This includes library programs like this one, staff development, building restoration, and other needs that aren't covered by our township funding. Your donations support everything from laptop lending, Wi-Fi hotspots for Montclair residents without internet access, to lifelong learning classes, homework tutoring and resume help, to the children's readings programs, and most recently, the significant growth in e-content during the pandemic. So after you enjoy this event, please make a donation through our website, montclairplf.org. Gifts of all sizes have an impact, and the library needs your support now more than ever. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the program.
Thank you so much for all that you do, Sheila. And if anyone in the audience wants to contribute to the library in other ways, please search for Friends of the Montclair Public Library on our website or on Facebook. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest of honor this afternoon, Sandra Cisneros. Sandra is best known for her classic coming-of-age novel, The House on Mango Street, which has sold over 6 million copies, been translated into 25 languages, and is required, that's still plenty of languages, and is still required reading in elementary, high school, and universities across the nation. Her numerous awards include a MacArthur Fellowship, NEA Fellowships, the Penn Center USA Literary Award, and the National Medal of the Arts Award presented to her by President Obama in 2016. Today, Sandra is coming to us all the way from San Miguel Allende, Mexico. Welcome, Sandra. Oh, I can't hear you.
There we go. Thank you for having me.
Sandra's latest work, Martita, I Remember You, is available to buy at our program partner, Watchung Booksellers, and is also available to borrow through the library. Now, I'm also delighted to introduce Sandra's conversation partner, Quiara Alegría Hudes, who recently came to Open Book, Open Mind in April to talk about her debut memoir, My Broken Language. Quiara is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, best known for writing the book and the film script to In the Heights. We're delighted to have you back. Welcome, Quiara.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited.
Okay, so this is the moment everybody's been waiting for. And for all of you at home, please remember that you can start submitting your questions while the conversation is going on. I'll be back after it's all over.
So I believe we were going to start by hearing some of your words in your voice. So am I correct about that, Sandra?
I think so. I think those were the instructions or suggestions. And to everyone out there, just want to let you know that the book is available as Martita, I Remember You, and you can flip it over, and it's Martita Te Recuerdo, beautifully translated by Liliana Valenzuela. Also, it's on audio, and all of my books are on audio. I read the English, but this is the first time that I have recorded the Spanish. So I'm going to read the English, of course, for you all today, but you take a listen to the audio, which was very challenging and fun. Okay, so this is a story about three women who are friends, and they meet each other when they're young in Paris. And the protagonist is Corina. She's nicknamed Pufina, and she's remembering after she's found a letter from Martita. So this is after she's read the letter, and she's remembering a moment when the three were together in Paris. Ay, Martita, it's been how many years since you wrote that? 10, 15? I haven't forgotten you. Not once. Those letters between us, pebbles tossed into water, the rings growing wider and wider. Rereading your letter this morning, it seems strange to hear myself called Pufina again after so much time. I don't know where I left Pufina. Paris, Nice, Sarajevo. So much has happened since then. I still have my copy of that photo, the one you mentioned from the Leal Metro. All of us squeezed into the booth, sticking our tongues out, crossing our eyes, Paula pugging her nose like a pig. 3 poses for 10 francs, one for you, one for me, one for Paula. Paula treated us, remember? We'd been Christmas shopping at the Galerie Lafayette all afternoon, looking and looking at pretty things. Just as we were leaving, the store detectives leapt out before the revolving doors. The 3 of us hustled to the stairwell, shoppers staring with their mouths open like fish. In the basement, a crowded wood-paneled office with a 2-way mirror. Slumped in a chair, crying and crying, someone's granny with hennaed hair. What had she taken? A chandelier? Where did she hide it, I wondered. I remember being cocky mad because I didn't know about Paula yet. Everything from my pockets on the desk as ordered. My Metro Card Sesame tickets, wrinkled Kleenex, the fluorescent pink notepad I bought at Monoprix, 2 purple felt tip pens, the key to the boys' apartment in Neuilly-sur-Seine, my wallet with all my French money, paper and coin, the American passport. I made sure they saw that. You didn't even blink when Paula pulled 3 pairs of gloves from her pocket like a string of paper dolls. 3 cheap woolen pairs with the price tags on them, a beige pair, an olive, a red. They let us go with a warning and ugly words thudding at our backs. When we're walking to the metro, Paula says, "Oh, I am so shameful, Pufina, not for me, but for you and Marta. Swear, Pufi, you will never tell anyone about this. Promise me, I beg of you." I promise, I say. Then, as if to make it all better, Paula treated us to the portraits. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I love this book. I'm so glad that we get to discuss it today. I wept listening to your beautiful audiobook, and I wept reading it on the page at different moments.
Did you laugh though? You have to laugh too.
Oh yes, I laughed, I smiled, I got very wistful. You know, one of the spots where I laughed was the canopy of marionettes hung above you, or hung above Pufina in the studio. And I just thought, what an image. So for those listening out there who have not yet read the book.
Yeah, don't give away the ending, Quiara. Don't give away the ending because you gotta not spoil it.
Okay. Yeah, the canopy of marionettes above, kind of like spooks and spirits and materials of an artist's life all together. I definitely laughed out loud at that, and many other images.
That's what an author wants to hear, that you cried and you laughed and you cried.
I gasped about the dream. There was a dream involving a tiger, and I gasped. It was extremely shocking to me. And then I did notice in the acknowledgments, there was an acknowledgement about
Yes,
this.
because, you know, when we write, we're not just making things up. And, you know, the reader always asks, is this true? Well, yes, but it didn't all happen to me. You know, I gather it like a mosaic, you know this. We gather from all the people that tell us stories, from the stories we've witnessed, from the stories that especially move us and stay in our hearts, and the stories in our own hearts that we lived that we wish we could forget. Those, I think, are essential to a writer.
So I want to start, I have some kind of formal questions I've typed up, and I know that we'll go off topic and go off course as we follow the thread of the conversation. But I know that people are tuning in because, of course, House on Mango Street is essentially an American rite of passage at this point. And it certainly was for me and for my siblings and cousins and now my children. And it's one of the good rites of passage, you know, the book that you get assigned, that unnerves you and that catches you, because I still don't take it for granted that a book in school is gonna be looking right at me. And that was one of the ones that did. You know, so, and so the readers know that work. They know Caramelo, or the audience out there, they know Loose Woman, your wonderful collection of poems, and other books of yours. I also am a huge fan of A House of My Own, which is your essay collection, your collected speeches and essays, which gives a real glimpse into more of the machinery of an artist's life. So my question I wanted to start with is, you know, who, asking you about this book, Martita, I Remember You, where are you? How do you reflect on your evolution as a writer? Who was Sandra who wrote House on Mango Street versus Sandra who wrote Martita, I Remember You, and the stops in between?
Well, you know, when we're young writers, we're always influenced by who we're reading. So we're trying to extend our reach beyond our capabilities to the writer we admire. And when I was reading writing House, I was reading a lot of the experimental Latin American writers, male at that time, because those are the ones that reached me. And so I was thinking the University of Texas created a collection that doesn't exist in Latin America. It only exists in the United States, of Jorge Luis Borges, a compilation of his writing. And they called it Dream Tigers after one of the vignettes that's called Dream Tigers. That little book, it's a slender compilation of, you know, his stories and poetry and those in-between things, those little 1-page, 2-page stories. Those in-between stories fascinated me. And they became a model of what I wanted to do when I was trying to wed fiction and poetry and write a story cycle. I didn't know about story cycles. Later on, I would meet those story cycles that would have a profound effect on me. But at the time, you know, Borges' Dream Tigers compilation. And, you know, I think each book that I've written has, like, you know, some writer in my mind that I'm trying to follow their footsteps. And I think for Martita, most of the writers I admire now that I'm 66 are women over 60 who have written their strongest works, like, you know, Jean Rhys, Diana Athill, Harriet Doer, Elena Garro, Elena Poniatowska, Marguerite Duras, and the pinnacle of those writers for me is Mercè Rodoreda, a Catalan writer. So her writing is influencing this book. She's not a humorous writer, the humor's me, but her sense of poignancy and her accuracy of trying to capture time and place and anchor it in the body. You know, that's a writer I admire very much. If you haven't read her, I recommend her short stories or her great novel, The Time of the Doves, which is the title in English.
I'm writing it down because I haven't. So I love that.
See, this is the thing. This is the thing. The women writers in translation, we don't get them. they don't get translated, even though she was cited as one of the great writers of the last century by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. If you look at the Spanish edition of her book, it's La Plaza del Diamante, Diamond Plaza. You can see why they didn't keep the title Diamond Plaza. But La Plaza del Diamante in the Spanish edition has a beautiful introduction by Garcia Marquez. So if you can read in Spanish, take a look at that. And the English is a tremendous translation. David Rosenthal is the translator. Great job. And, I've read it in both languages. I don't read Catalan, but the Spanish is close enough that I can get the flavor of it. And, I've read her other work and I love her short stories. Again, Grey Wolf Press has done a lovely edition called My Christina and other stories. And her short stories are like novels. So I was trying also to write a novel in a short form. And I don't know if this is a short story or a long short story or a short novel. And, it doesn't matter. I think I got the density of a whole world, and like the density of Caramelo with the brevity of House on Mango Street. So I'm very pleased with this book. It's so far my favorite.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And hearing about your what you've been reading and who you've been reading and when in your life you've been reading them for this book, it makes me think of something one of my writing teachers told me, which always fascinated me. This notion that there's 3 stages in an artist's life. This naive stage where they're playing around with voice, this sophisticated stage where they're starting to get more conscious about the tools they're using, and then this later stage, which I wonder if some of these women who influence this book are in, and that if this book is in, which is the decadent phase, which is you've really created a body of work. Now now it's like, fuck it, I'm gonna I'm getting decadent. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it to keep myself in.
Well, decadent. I would think that we would keep each of those. They're like Russian dolls. There's still. You need to have that sense of naivete, even as an older writer, and the sophistication. But I think in this stage, there's also humility, which is very important. We're not taught in North America by Anglo society that humility is what we should aim for, whereas people of color and people of the Americas, Native people, know that humility is one of the great standards that we should rise to. And I think that the humility is what keeps you open to listening and learning and realize, I'm not there yet. Maybe in 15 more years I'll get there. And it keeps you learning and growing. And so I think maybe for me, I like that I'm probably the most naive person I know, and that I've retained that. I'm still inocente. I'm still an innocent. The parts that of Corina Pufina that's innocent, that's me. And the parts that are like more street smart, Paula, that's me later when I'm older. And Martita and her tenderness and caregiving, that's a part of me too. But, in real life, they're based on real people, several. And I had to draw from that well that is myself too, so that, the parts of me that are like the real Paula and the parts of me that are like the real Martita, to make to breathe life into these little clay figures. You've got to rummage in your own heart and emotions to make the characters real. So in some ways, these are me at different stages in my life. Me, the inocente, but I'm still the inocente, and me who has been, crushed by all the whipped cream pies like Martita, and then the buoyant cork Paula who survives the disasters. That's me too. But that's everybody, don't you think?
I really envied Pufina's innocence. I have to say, I wish I couldn't remember a time. And
you weren't like that?
No, and I was sorrowful that I wasn't. I loved that. Her friends talking about, well, don't you think this about making love? And don't you think that? And Pufina's like, honey, I don't know, you know, and it's not just kind of technical innocence, as you know, but there is an innocence about life that I think her friends are very drawn to, even though they're more worldly.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Quiara, when I was writing that scene, when the girls are talking about making love, it's a scene that my favorite scene, and Martita is talking to our protagonist, Corina. And Corina says, well, you know, when she asks her, don't you think this is how it is when you make love? And Corina says, I don't know. I've never made love. That shocked me because up until that point, I had been writing from memory, and suddenly my character took off, and she wasn't me, and she became herself. And I think that's magical when that happens, when you're a writer and you're just a medium channeling these spirits that are talking through you. When she said that the story really took off for me.
You know, I hope that our audience understands what you have described. It's one of the most special moments in a writing life, when the characters start to show you, and it feels like such a gift. I mean, this is the child getting the gift they wanted on Christmas morning. You know, this is the feeling we chase. And I remember them. It doesn't happen all the time. Once they've revealed, there's more reveals, but that first time is really special. And so I love that you've let us into that.
Yes. It's like you're writing from memory, and you're hoping it's a runway till the character lifts off and has wings. You're waiting for the character to get wings because you don't want to be shackled to the earth. You want the story to take off. And that the moment for me when I was writing this, that it took off. You know, Quiara, that this was a abandoned short story that I wrote 30 years ago. Circa Woman Hollering Creek. And it was supposed to be part of that collection, which, you know, it didn't fit thematically. And it also didn't fit because I didn't have the middle letter section. I didn't have the conclusion. I thought, well, this is enough. You know, I was so tired of writing stories. I just wanted to get that book in. And my editor and my agent said, no, this story isn't finished. I thought, oh, okay, I'll just finish it later. And 30 years later, I'm kind of slow. You know, here it is. But it was one of my favorite stories. I just couldn't finish it at that time. And I started working on it again in the last couple of years. And that's why you should never throw anything away. Save all of your dead end stories or dead end writing, because you can recycle them and reuse them later.
So you pulled it out of a drawer just in the same way that Bufina was rummaging through for the letter, and then her spirit is doing somersaults to the past, or the past is doing somersaults to her present. One of those two.
Yeah, the characters were still talking to me. You know, I was hoping that I could finish it, and I tried to make it a full-length novel because that's what people want. But you know, I'm not one of those writers like that you want 300 pages, I'll give you 300 pages. No. I feel like I have a little burro. I think my nagual, my animal spirit, is a little burro. And I can just, like, you know, say, come on, giddy up, let's go. And the burro is very terco and stubborn. This is as far as I'm going, lady. Get off. You know, and that's how the story was. I tried to make it go farther, and it just dug in its heels. And this is what it wants to be. I said, okay, all right, I'm listening to you, little burro.
You know, letters are only so long. And the spirit of the letter does pervade, even though it's not all epistolary. There are some letters, and then there are recollections. So was it is framed in the beginning as she is using a blowtorch to peel back some layers of varnish, and then the memory layers start peeling.
Yeah, and you know, that's funny because I don't know how I put that in there. I did that job once a long time ago, before I traveled to Europe, for a boyfriend who lived in this 3-story, 6-flat apartment in the Pilsen barrio. And, you know, he would give me this blowtorch, and he was a carpenter. This is what you do. Here's what you do. And, I didn't even know how to hold a hammer. He showed me how to swing a hammer, how to scrape things, to take a sledgehammer and knock down walls. I just was a little princess. But I for some reason, that memory of scraping all that honey-like varnish that's on those hutches in Chicago, I don't know where that came from or how that came to be in the story. And I didn't make the connection between the past and memory and the scraping till after the story was done. Isn't that the wonderful thing about writing? We don't know what we're doing. We're so in the zone, we don't see it.
Well, you were talking earlier about that a writer is a rummager. We're rummaging through our lives. And it just seemed such a fitting word for this book, and maybe for the cosmology and the body of work you've built, because I feel that you have an antiquer's heart. I feel that you have a flea market attendee's heart. I feel, you're writing about houses and we see your beautiful house in the background. And here
all those things are for my rummaging.
Yes.
All those Mexican batea plates, or, I have to buy them in the United States and repatriate them because they're more expensive in Mexico these days, these antiques. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, wow.
You have to repatriate these Mexican plates that are cheaper in Santa Fe, New Mexico than San Miguel de Allende. Go figure. Right?
So the book is about the three friends in Paris, these three young women who have very different personalities, but they're all just kind of desperately trying to enter womanhood with some semblance of independence and maybe bohemian spunk, to escape back home, to prove something to back home, to prove something in here. And one of my questions that I just was dying to ask you was about your own female friendships in your real life. What kind of friendships do you have? Which ones were ephemeral and fleeting, like in this book, and which ones survived?
Well, when we're young, we think that our friends are going to be our friends forever. I don't know if you thought that. I thought my high school friends were going to be my friends like till they buried me. And I was really shocked at how once I found my voice and my community of writers, I just abandoned my friends. They must think very little of me for abandoning them, but I really felt I didn't have anything in common. And then I abandoned those friends from college, and I just kept shedding skins. Yeah, so there's few women that have been friends for a long time. One of them is one of my Martitas, one of the women that I met when I was traveling. My sister, a spirit sister, Jasna from Sarajevo. I've written about her in House of My Own, and she and I are still very, very close. And probably the closest person who knows me the best. And then I have a couple of other friends, that have come into my life. I've moved here to Mexico. Some of my friendships in the United States dissolved, and some of us grew apart. We don't expect that when we're young because we haven't lived heartbreak. And I think it's really heartbreak that creates fissures in relationships. If people don't travel with you during heartbreak, then you feel like you've got nothing in common. And for me, that was the case. So I have people who knew me back when I was in college, and people who knew me after this trip to Europe, and friends that were very close in my 30s that I see once in a while, but I'm not close with anymore. And then other friends, the ones that from the last 20 years, I think have been the ones that I feel are my chosen family. Because my blood family, I left home several times in my 20s, and I love my blood family, but they don't know who I am. And if I think about it, I really don't know who they are either. Right?
Are there friendships that were ephemeral, but rather than dropping them, like the high school and college friends, that still feel really like the flame still burns inside, even though you're no longer in touch?
Yeah, there are people in my life about. And, maybe this book is about those friendships that have fallen away, that I think about them on occasion, certain moments when I'm doing certain things or saying certain things or pulling on a cowboy boot, or, rummaging through a flea market, things that I learned from people in my life. And you think about them with tenderness and love, no matter how the relationship ended. And I think Martita is about that love that you feel for people that came in your life, because sometimes people come in your life and they're North Stars, they really guide you. And sometimes people come into your life and they're exploding cigars. And some people are both. Some people are both. And I'm writing about that in my next collection of essays, which is called Exploding Cigars, and in small print, North Stars. So, it's about those people that shape us and take us by force or by grace into our life path.
I did once explode my Aunt Alice's cigars on April Fool's Day.
Oh my.
They made a bang. Or her cigarettes. They were cigarettes, but I put the little tablet in and boom.
She still talks to you?
She still talks to me. Bless her soul. I don't know why she put up with me. I have some more questions about Bufina. One is, okay, so she's a Chicago writer. She speaks English and Spanish. And she goes to Paris and struggles with the language. She is so terrified of speaking French, she won't even go. She decides she can't even go get a baguette. It's just too awful an experience. And everywhere she goes, people are making fun of her French. And, why did she feel like she had no place in an English language or Spanish language tradition? Why does she go as a writer, go to the place where she's lost at sea in terms of language?
Well, I think most writers think that they have to travel to Paris to become real writers, especially writers coming from a community where you don't know writers and you want to be a real writer. How do you become a real writer coming from the barrio, coming from a poor community? You look at the movies and you see, you read the biographies of other writers and you follow in their footsteps because you hope it's going to rub off, or it will somehow, in your own mind, make you officially a writer. Now, you're filled with a lot of doubts. It's not like something that, even if you get a degree, it doesn't make you a writer. So I think when you're young, you want to do writer things. You want to hang out in cafes and, smoke clove cigarettes and wear black eyeliner. You think you do these superficial things, because you think that's going to make you a writer. No?
It's funny how we pin our hopes and our identity on other people's writing paths. And then at a certain point, that doesn't bear fruit, and you realize, well, okay, there's traditions all around me and those traditions are part of my heart, but I'm alone in this. Yeah. And I have to walk my own path. So Bufina does not, in the book, she doesn't write. She goes to Paris she's submitted her stuff to a foundation and she's just waiting. And if she gets this grant and if she gets the thing, if it's a residency or something, that's it. Then she doesn't have to go back to Chicago with her head hung low. Then she has made it as a writer. But she doesn't write actually in the book. And so I'm curious, is that part of kind of the sparse sculptural structure of the book? Or was she writing in Paris? Was she doing it?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Is this the hole in her heart? You mentioned there's a hole in her heart.
Yeah.
And things it could be, and the hole in the heart whistles, it gets cold and the hole whistles. But I thought, is she not writing while she's in Paris trying to be a writer? And is that is that the hole in the heart? I got very distressed by this.
Oh, wow. You're a good reader. It's a writer who's reading this book. I think that you can make a point for that. I think that, she's postponing the writing. Sometimes we postpone and say, okay, as soon as I get this, then I'll start writing. That I'm too cold, or I don't have any place to ride, or I'm riding the metro. She's riding the metro to stay warm, so there's not exactly, she can't go into cafes because they scare her. So maybe it's too hard physically. You know, if you've been in Europe in December and November and January, it's pretty miserable. You know, it's kind of like she's kind of like a Charles Dickens character, you know, looking at life outside of the warm windows and not being able to come in, being on the outside. And, you know, not actually even having a place of her own, because what do we need as writers but a space, a time? Even if you live with 8 other people, as I did, I would stay up late at night until I could have some privacy. But you need privacy. And more than anything for women, you also need to feel safe. And I don't see that in this story. Do you?
That she needs to feel safe?
That she's safe. There's this not, you know, I know when I write, I need to feel like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm warm and that I have a couple of hours, you know, minimum 2 or 6 is better. And I don't want to be interrupted. And I want to feel safe. You know, I can't write if I'm scared that there's some little creature scratching in the door, as sometimes would happen in places that I stayed at. There'd be some creature at night. I never opened the door to see what it was. Scratch, scratch, scratch. What was it? Was it a little creature? Was it a big one? Was it a ghost? Who knows? To this day, I don't know. But you can't write if there's, you know, a little wolf at the door.
In addition to which, you know, something about her innocence, which I just was one of the most affecting parts of the book for me. She knows some things to be afraid of. I mean, hunger is hunger, cold is cold. You know, scary sounds outside your door, but she also doesn't know the dangers. It's like she didn't have the abuela warning her, never sit on a man's lap because like she doesn't seem to know the worst case scenario. So when she goes and shacks up with the marionette duo, you know, she's so surprised that one night. I mean, you know, when she feels a finger circling her navel. And then she freezes up, and it works out okay. She protects herself in this somewhat intuitive, quiet way. Mm-hmm. But it's like that really took her by surprise. You know, meanwhile, there's all sorts of women coming through the apartment doing all who knows what orgiastic stuff with the puppeteers.
Yeah, I feel as if when I was writing those scenes, I was taking a lot of things from my own life. You know, like I really did live that chapter with the puppeteers. But I wasn't 20 years old. I was 30 practically. And, you know, I still had this, you know, maybe because I lived with 6 brothers, I had this great trust of men and love and respect for them. So I always thought I was safe with men. Isn't that weird? You know, but if you grow up in a house of men, you talk to them and you behave with them differently and you think of them differently, but you don't think of how they see you. You're not the sister. You know, I was always feeling rather invisible as a woman, as a child, as a writer. And those are good things for writers because we want to feel invisible so that we can spy on the world. But my friends at that time, though, were maybe because I am inocente, were 20 years old, 21. The women I hung out with, for the most part, when I was traveling, were younger. And men I hung out with were younger too. And this was the case when I was on my first journey that this book is based on. I would have different adventures in different countries, but in Paris, maybe because I trusted the immigrants, maybe because my father's an immigrant, maybe because they spoke with an accent, I felt safe. And to me, whenever I'm with someone who reminds me of my father, who was real caballero, you know, real gentleman, he was kind of like Don Quixote, there's a trust that I have. So, you know, that's been my whole life. So maybe that's just my own myopia because I was raised with my father and my 6 brothers.
I really appreciate that. And maybe in some ways, if Bufina has a similar background in that, or maybe she has a good radar for the men to be around that, look, humans are humans and the human body wants to do certain things, but she's not harmed, nor is she really disrespected. There's some gray areas there. She's certainly uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, but I think that sometimes in my life I have met people of all ages, old or young, and I still feel, I don't know if it's me or the writer self, invisible. I don't feel like I have a body or a presence. I feel like a little ball of light. Remember when they used to, maybe you don't remember because I'm older, they used to have this follow the bouncing ball, and you would watch a cartoon and you would sing with it. I'm the bouncing ball of little light. And I've always just been kind of invisible and think I'm invisible and no sense of presence or self. My father was like that too. If he saw something really interesting, he'd stare. If it was really good, he'd go around the block. And he was kind of, he's gone, kind of a busybody. And I think writers are kind of like that too. And that sometimes when we get in the zone, we think we're invisible. The nice thing about getting older is that you get invisible again. Like there's that time when you're an adolescent till, your mid-30s that suddenly, like anytime you enter a room, you pick up the vibes of guys watching you. But when you get to be my age, you get to be invisible again. And there's a comfort and a beauty and a power in that invisibility in order to navigate the world without being bugged. And to navigate the world as a writer, you want to be invisible.
Yeah. And I think maybe something about Bufina's invisibility is ultimately comforting to her friends, and that they see it and appreciate it. They are more visible women, and that comes with its pluses and minuses, but I do want to look back.
I wonder if men realize, I remember when I was teaching, and my students, male students, they had no idea the terror that women always felt of always feeling, the women my students' age, of always feeling like they were prey. And it's like, unless, I would tell them, go ask your mother and go ask your sisters, because they just didn't believe me that that's a reality that you have. Even Corina at the end of the story in Chicago, she wants to go to the lake, but she has to navigate. How do I get from the bus stop to the lake without anybody bugging me, bothering me? That's something that has to be navigated. And you have to think about that. How do you dress? When I used to come to Mexico and I was in that vulnerable ages, I would have to dress a certain way. I had to wear my nun's clothes so that, no mini skirts, nothing. You had to be very, very lucid about what culture you're going into. So I think that that's there at the end of the book too, when Corina reminds us what it's like to live in the world in a woman's body. I tried to be very close to documenting that and being very true for what life is like for women, these three different women, and the exploding cigars, whether it's like, trying to make your money last longer and sleeping on two puppeteers' floors, or sleeping with someone who has a little canoe bed, or, all the mistakes that we make as women. And I think those mistakes, though, challenge us to get up and keep going. How do we survive these mistakes that we make as young women? And how do they shape us to who we are when we're older?
I think at the end, I'm going to be very conscious of not doing any spoilers.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I mean, my heart just swells thinking about the ending. And, I think Bufina I can only call her Bufina. I see her through Martita's eyes, and.
Yeah, she's Corina, but they nickname her Bufina after a cartoon character, which are the Smurfs in Italy, are known as Poofies. And so Corina in the story becomes Bufina. And so she has two identities, the young girl in Paris is Pufina, and then the grown-up person is Corina.
You know, I think at the end, she's in some ways, I feel conflicted because she has both really come to peace and, as you said, perhaps in a truly humble and peaceful way with how that invisibility has rippled through her life. So I feel gratitude for that peace that she has reached, but I also feel sadness in it. And she has.
Well, you feel sadness because you're a writer. That's why. You know, we've lived a different route, no? But when I think about that ending, it's based a lot on real women I know who, you know, ran alongside me and diverged and took a different life path. And, you know, I think about, you know, how is it that I am where I am, and, you know, other people took different life paths and went different routes. And that's not wrong for them. You know, that, you know, sometimes we see it only through the myopia of our eyes. This is what I would want for her. But it's really hard for us sometimes to accept that sometimes the camino you're on, the path, takes you somewhere else than what you planned.
Is there a part of that, Sandra, that is the book a little bit of a what if for you? I mean, all these parallel tracks.
You know, I have so many people that Martita's based on that, you know, if I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, I would name them. You know, there's like real strands of real women that I know. And some are people that I met briefly, and some are people that are friends, some people are related to me. There's so many, you know, nieces and cousins, and, you know, it just, a friend of mine said, I think you've written about your mother. And I thought, oh, my mother. Oh my goodness. You know, if you read my essays, you know my mother's story. So my mother died in 2007, and maybe in a way I'm writing about my mother. I've never stopped writing about my mother. You know, I wrote about her in Caramelo. She's in my upcoming collection of poetry. She's in vignettes in the new collection of essays, and strands of her, not completely, of course, are here as well.
Yeah, I do. I feel sad for Corina Pufina at the end, because as a writer, but not just that, also as a wife and as a mother, you know, and she reflects on her, you know, the daily compromises of a stable life at the end, and those hit home, even though they're different than mine. Mm-hmm. And she's pretty convincing, you know. It's a reflection, and it's not a letter to Martita, but she is still trying to explain her heart to Martita, and then maybe therefore to herself, you know.
Yeah, but don't you think that too with people you've lost touch with, that sometimes you write a mental letter? The story is like a letter she never mailed. It's a mental letter. And I don't know about you, but I have these bruja moments, these kind of moments where I'm thinking about a close friend, and then she'll call me and say, oh, she's thinking of you. Don't you do that? These bruja moments where, like, our power of concentration, that's how I feel that, you know, the protagonist is with her friends, that she's not making that up, that they're really thinking about her. She's thinking about them. And even if they don't communicate, they still think about each other. You know, the title is I Remember You. And this story is about not just the past remembering, but a remembering into the present and the future. It's an eternal memory. And I believe, I'm convinced it's mutual.
I love that. And it gives me a sense, because I don't know where Paula and Martita are at the end.
Yeah, I don't know where all these women that I gathered their strands of their stories are either. I mean, I'm only in touch with a couple, and but I'm sure they think about me, just like I think about them. I'm hoping that some of them will appear and say, oh, I read your story, you know, somehow that they'll come back and I'll find them again. But even if I don't, you know, one of the things I learned about losing my parents is that we can continue to send and receive love when people have crossed over. But I believe that's true when people are alive, that we can continue to send them love and we can continue to receive it. And all we have to do is just like think about them profoundly and con puro amor. But don't you think we should ask if there are any questions from people?
Let me ask you one more question that I'm
dying sure
about. Okay, so this is, you know, because Corina is I think withholding and small of stature, and she has two moments at the end though where it's primal. It is freaking primal, and one is the tiger dream, and the other one is in real life. She's in a square eating lunch, and she sees a bird take a bath in the dust.
Yes.
And he lets out a roar.
Yeah.
So much that a security guard comes over and says, "Are you okay?" And she makes a joke. That was one of the times I laughed. She says, "Oh, female troubles," which wasn't a lie. And, you know, what do you think? Is that something that was too late? Did she scream too late?
No. Read Time of the Doves, and you will see at the end that the protagonist, who also has two names, her name is Natalia, but her nickname is Colometa, which means dove. And she has a moment like that. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was imitating it until you say it now, because in real life, I did have a moment where, you know, I had a grief that I held in, and it came out that way. It really was like spasmic. And I think that until we have lived that grief and had it escape our body, it's like, you know, it possesses us. And I never cried like that before or after. It was when my father was dying, and he was going through a long, you know, slow death through cancer. And someone who didn't know any better asked me, you know, what's your father? I heard your father's sick. What's he sick from? You know, thinking it was a cold or something. And I hadn't said it out loud because I had just gotten the news. I hadn't grieved. I was in my mother and father's house. And I said, he has cancer. And then it all kind of like vomit. I just ran, and I was in a public space. I had to run into the restrooms in a public museum in Chicago. Imagine crying like that, going, you can't even talk. And you'll like this story. I was supposed to go on stage with Toni Morrison, among others. And I couldn't even talk. So I came out to the stall thinking, maybe I can send a message. How can I get out? I can't even talk. And Anna Devere Smith came in the bathroom. Anna Devere Smith, yeah, I know it's like a play. Anna Devere Smith comes in the bathroom, sees Sandra Cisneros, like spasmic, can't talk, and says, can you, I can't come, like that. You know, it was like, and she looked at me with these big eyes and said, don't worry. And she ran. Instead of like leaving me alone, she brought two other people, including Toni Morrison, into the bathroom. So that's how I met Toni Morrison. And I was going, and Toni Morrison, you know, she's big as a mountain. I'm a little thing. She hugged me and said, mourn. And meanwhile, I was like thinking, one day I'll be able to write about this and it'll be funny, but not today. You know, and I was just like, like that. That was like so, you know, it so stayed with me. I've never cried like that from the belly, like an animal yelping. And I just used that button and put it at the end there. But now you're reminding me it's also in Time of the Dove. Mira nomás.
And the book ends with the phrase, I hug you. You know, so now I know that hug is also the hug of Toni Morrison. You know,
I want to write a button for the Exploding Cigars book about that whole episode because it's even longer and crazier. But like Anna Devere Smith can vouch. That's the only time I met her. So Anna, she can vouch. She won't forget me if you ever meet her and mention.
Wow. I will. So thank you for indulging me in that question. I wanted to ask about that, but yes, I think that we do have some questions from the audience. So we have Kiki, which is my nickname, says
That's
this
my
is
brother's nickname. Yeah.
She says this isn't a question, or he says this isn't a question, but I lost my sister Natalia recently to cancer. I can relate.
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, I hope, Kiki, that you are transforming your grief in some way. If you're not a writer, I would recommend that you create an altar for your sister. Day of the Dead is coming. You can start thinking about things that remind you of her, things she loved. And you don't have to take down the altar. You know, my altars are up all over the house all year round. Creating an altar has put me in the same place as writing. In fact, I just talked about this at the National Museum of Mexican Art. If you go on there, there's an interview with one of my altars from my mother. And I talked about the process of creating the altar, put you in a state of like your broken heart. You know, you need that broken heart to write, but you also needed to create anything, create art, create a garden. From that place of creation, the most powerful art or product will be created if you're heartbroken, really. So you might as well create now, because it's going to transform you. It'll help you to communicate and reconnect with your lost one, and it will strengthen and transform sorrow to illumination. It's not going to get rid of the sorrow, because we never get over a death, but we learn how to live alongside it. And I also would recommend you read the epilogue to a book I wrote about death and surviving a loved one's death. It's called Have You Seen Marie? And there's an epilogue there for you. You could take it out of the library. I want to invite everyone to please support the libraries. They do so much healing work. I'm a product of the library. I wouldn't be a writer if it wasn't for the library and my mother taking me there every week. So I really love the pitch that they put out there. But I recommend, Kiki, that you read that and look at the epilogue and read Thich Nhat Hanh, and read all of the great spiritual masters that will help you transform your grief to illumination and teach you how to live alongside that sorrow. And I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you so much for that beautiful answer. And I do love, there's something about the house that just grounds you, Sandra, in the spirit. It grounds the spirit right to the earth. And I feel that in your writing, and even just to take a question about grief and put it into the altar, this material world that we're in, I think is wonderful. And she says, thank you so much. She appreciates that. I have a question from Crystal about who's teaching Mango Street to her 8th graders. And she wonders, what words of wisdom do you have for young people right now?
Oh, well, first you have to tell young people that I'm so proud of you, that your generation is rising up and becoming activists. You know, I thought we were going to see that again. It's so beautiful to see young people organizing themselves and creating movements to save the planet and to bring justice to communities that are suffering from police brutality, from all kinds of things, voting, you know, immigration rights. I'm so impressed by the young people. So I hope that you will take the words of Esperanza to heart when she's having her conversation with her friend Alicia. And Alicia says, she's saying, oh, I don't want to come back to Mango Street. And her friend says, well, who's going to make it better? The mayor? And Esperanza thinks and says, no, the mayor's not going to make it better. And I think that there's many messages. The message I want to give those young people is like, how are we going to make this planet better? If COVID isn't a wake up for how we have to take care of one another, I don't know what is. So you're living through historical times, just amazing times. You are the hero of the story called your life. So remember that.
Beautiful, thank you. And Ana Montoya has a favorite eternal question for writers. Can you tell us a bit about your writing process? And she does ask, when you begin something, do you already know where you want to go with it from the start? But I think you answered that a little bit. This had a very circuitous journey. So what was your writing process?
Well, my writing process, I never know what I'm writing. I don't even know what it is that I'm writing. On the days that I write, I don't speak, I don't do Zooms, I don't make phone calls or emails. On the days that I write, I put aside a day when I'm going to be quiet. And I try to talk very little. And if I have to talk, and then I try to lie down so I can kind of meditate and take a nap if I'm lucky and come right back. And I try to give myself a couple of hours, like, 2 to 6 hours so that I can do some real work. And I usually dig around. I usually have a project I'm working on. I have little like buttons, and what I call buttons, suggestions of things that make no sense to anyone. One of my notebooks will say like, hit by a car. Well, that makes no sense to anyone, but I got hit by a car when I was in college. And let me tell you, there's a good story there. So that'll remind me, okay, tell that story. And if it's not working, I'll put that one down and then say, mother insult. Oh yeah, when my mother gave me that insult. Okay, I got to write about that. I'll think about the things that you wish you could forget. There's a lot of power there. Write about that. And then think about the things that if this was your last day on earth, what is the most important thing that you haven't said? And I always remind younger writers, if it wasn't documented, it never happened. So the things that happen to you that nobody knows about, if you don't write it down, it never happened. Or things that happen to the people you love or the community you love and you witnessed, if you don't write it down, it never happened. So that kind of gets me, those are like my prompts, that kind of gets me going. And finally, you're not alone. All you have to do is connect with your ancestors, your spirit allies, start with the people whose names you know, and then branch out and think of their parents until you have this whole forest of spirit allies helping you to write one page, a page and a quarter, and to honor them with your writing. You want to do work that will honor and be of purpose and serve. That's it.
Thank you. What do you think? One more?
Yeah, I like these questions.
This is a fun one. Patricia once really enjoyed the dreamlike tone of Martita, I Remember You, and asked if you would talk about that a little bit.
Well, I also hear a dreamlike tone, and I tried to capture that in the audio. And I was trying to figure out, I had a wonderful theater oral interp friend who would always teach me how to perform a piece, that you had to begin in the beginning. Where were you when you were writing this? Not when you finished it. So I try to get in that frame of mind, like when I was scratching that line, where was I? Not when I finished the piece. And I thought about that it should be like an interior monologue, that kind of quiet voice that you hear. And you're going to laugh at me, but I was rewatching episodes of I, Claudius with Derek Jacobi, and he begins it as he's writing his memoirs. Again, if he doesn't write it down, it never happened. So he's writing, and his voice is this interior, quiet voice. And so that taught me like to go there when I recorded it.
Oh, that's wonderful. And these questions are pouring in, so I'm going to keep going through them because they're wonderful questions.
I have time if you have time.
Did you experience a turning point from being a student of writing to being a writer? Can you describe the change?
Well, I remember when I was a student and people would say, what workshop are you in? What are you? And you had to say, I'm a poet or I'm a fiction writer. And the first time that they asked me that, and I said, I'm a poet, I wanted to giggle because it sounded so crazy and, say it out loud. I mean, I was 21 years old, but to say I'm a poet, it was kind of like saying I'm a witch, something like I'm a sorcerer, it was a little wacky. So I didn't really feel like a real writer. I think it took a long time. I think I still feel surprised I'm a writer, like when I hear you reading my introduction, Quiara. you know, am I really a writer? Will my work stand the test of time? Yeah, it's in high schools, but look what happened to Pobrecita Harriet Beecher Stowe. You know, what about those people who win the Pulitzer and Nobel and we don't remember them? So sometimes I think, yeah, but what about in 50 years? And then I think, oh, that's your ego, Sandra. That's just your ego. It's just your ego. It's okay. Okay. Then I calm down. And then we have to think more like, is the writing doing the work? And for me, the work means, is it going to change people's minds? Is it going to transform people? Will it uplift? Will it save lives? Will it help heal people? That's what I want. I don't want it to do negative things and create more violence and pain. There's enough of that in the world. I feel like the planet gets shifted off its axis. And right now we're in that time in history with COVID and with all the environmental stuff, you know, crisis. The whole planet is like, I got a hangover. And all of us who are trying to do something good with our thoughts or our writing or by supporting the library, or, you know, the good stuff, we just push the planet a little bit back on its axis. Just a little bit. That's how I feel, that we just have to take care of our little drop.
Thank you. Eve asked, what is the hardest part about writing for you and what is the easiest?
I think the easiest is signing the book. It's like putting the icing on the cupcakes. I really like signing the books. People apologize and say, oh, I've got 10 books. I say, no, give me those books. Every time I sign it, I feel like a real life writer. You know, wow, I wrote this book. You know, and I never get over the thrill. So that's the easiest part. The hardest part is finishing something. I start a lot of things, finishing, and you're filled with doubts when you write. And, you know, even when it's like handed in, you think, is that any good? Do you think that's any good? You know, I feel like that even when I'm reading the galleys. Is this any good? I have doubts. I have very high standards. And I beat myself up a lot about the writing. So I have to depend on the kindness of my beloved friends who are writers and my beloved agents and editors. I have to trust. But I don't trust just one. I always have, like, you know, 5 people that I'll share the writing with, because I'm not sure it's any good. Even to the end, I'm just filled with doubts. Could I do better? Probably. You know.
You might have answered this already, but I'm going to ask it in case you haven't. Do you have a favorite author?
I have many favorite authors, and right now, you know, some of them you can search on the New York Times Book Review, asked me those questions. You can look up by the book. I name a lot of those writers because there's so many. I used to have a favorite writer page on my website. But I took that down because there was just too much clutter, and I wanted to add bilingual pages. So now there's bilingual information. You can follow me on Instagram. I always post new books that I'm reading that I'm excited about. I just finished Joy Harjo's Poet Warrior, her second part of her memoir. I just finished reading, what else do I have on the bedside? Oh, I always forget her name. Her name. Oh, well, I'm not going to remember it's the titles, but I can't remember the name. But Gordo by Jaime Cortez. And I'm reading Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book about guns, and I forgot the title. I'm always reading poetry. I read a lot of poetry, and the poetry sustains me. I have Rigoberto Gonzalez's book there, Eduardo Corrales' new book. I just read a lot of poetry. Poetry is, to me, the most difficult of all the genres. And if you can master poetry, then you can do anything.
And someone had asked for a kind of a written list of some of the works that you mentioned. And Ariel at the library did say that they're going to put it in a follow-up email.
Oh, terrific. That's very nice. Yes, good.
All right, 2 more questions and then 2 more comments, and then we'll end with a question. One is Ileana Martí says, Hola, we are college friends from over 30 years. We are following you and this story. This book will be the next one in our book club because it mirrors our friendship. Gracias.
Yay, thank you so much.
Margaret says, I'm a teacher of multilingual students, and we emulated your book, and I called it The Class in D115. Your stories were remarkable. You gave them a voice. I am probably your biggest fan.
Oh, thank you. And, when I was a teacher, I also did that. When I did poetry in the schools, I would make the children make their own books, and they would handwrite them. It's good for handwriting too, because a lot of kids don't know how to write anymore. And we would make the cover, and we would look at the parts of a book. And you know how they have the author photo? The students would draw their own portraits, and they would write their own bios, and they would make up their own blurbs. People saying, this is the greatest book since the tortilla. And the price. And I remember this little girl that I had, and I'll never forget her name. She wrote we were doing poetry. So she had her cover, and they had to look at books and come up with the title. And her title was The Collected Works of Evelyn Loera. She had 4 poems, but that was her collected works, right?
Evelyn, that's it. That's wonderful.
So try that. You'll learn the parts of the book. You might have to put table contents, but I love that they did these little portraits, and they were so cool. And I'll never forget you, Evelyn Loera, wherever you are. I remember you.
And the last question of the evening, is there a writer's workshop you recommend for aspiring writers?
Yes, I do. I recommend the Macondo Writers Workshop that I founded, but I sometimes do a guest appearance. I no longer teach. Macondo Writers Workshop, you can Google it and find Macondo. It's taught by different guest writers that come in, and you have to apply to get in, but you can work your way towards what the requirements are. It's a master's class, but there are other workshops that you can work your way towards getting in. But you can look at Poets and Writers magazine. But I love Macondo. It's dear to me. It meets in the summertime. Last year it met virtually. I don't know if it's meeting virtually this year, but check it out. It's a good one.
Well, Sandra, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
And will I get a copy of this, Quiara? Because we had such a great conversation. Can I get a copy for my archives? You suppose that Ariel will make sure I get a copy?
Well, I think I'm supposed to throw it to Ariel right now. So why don't we have her answer that? And answer that question too.
Yes, I'd like to have that copy for my archives for future scholars, because we had a great time here.
This really was such a wonderful conversation. And I feel like I got to know you a little bit, Sandra, and even more than through your work, which has so much of you in it, as every good piece of writing does. And yes, there will be a recording that's available on YouTube, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the link. And I'll follow up with you just to verify the list, and we'll post it on our website, and we'll send a link in our follow-up letter to everybody who's signed up for the webinar tonight. I mean, it seems like night because it's getting dark out. It was such a wonderful and memorable conversation. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody here for joining us today, because of course, without you, we don't have a program. And I want to finally remind you that Martita, I remember you, and Martita, te recuerdo, and Sandra and Quiara's other books are also available for sale by our partner, Watchung Booksellers, and they're also available to borrow through the library. And this is the moment when I remind everybody that if you care about a writer, then you you buy their books. If you want their voice to go out into the world and you want them to be able to support themselves, if you want more books like this, if you want them to come back to programs like Open Book, Open Mind, you support them and you support their art, because there's no greater compliment to a writer than to own a copy of their book.
And I want to add that I'm reading Quiara's memoir right now. I just got it. And I wish I live in another country, so I'm getting it through reading it on my phone. I wish I had a hard copy, but you in the United States, you can get a hard copy, which is so nice. You can write in the margin, you can bend the page, you can smell the book, which I like to do. And I am such a supporter of writers and younger writers and libraries. So this is a treat for me to have a fellow writer ask such writerly questions. And it's a treat for me to meet you, Ariel, and Sheila on your board, and Saulo, to doing the good work at the time of COVID. You're doing great work. I wish they would make statues to librarians and teachers, because you really are out there on the front line doing very hard work during this period. Thank you so much. And I'm going to bring out my dog, who's been sitting here quietly, Naui. Saluda, Naui. There she is, my Mexican hairless. Thank you so much. One more thing. If anyone has questions that they didn't get to ask, or you were too shy, because I wouldn't have asked a question, you can write to me and send it to my website, www.sandracisneros.com. And I answer all my letters, okay? You can mark private, do not publish it, or it's okay to publish.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the library love. We need that, and we appreciate it more than we can say. And finally, I hope that everybody in the audience will join us for our next event with Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Andrea Elliott, who's the author of Invisible Child: Poverty, Survival, and Hope in an American City, on Thursday, November 11th at 7 p.m. She'll be talking with Lydia Polgreen, the former editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, for Sandra and for Quiara for the wonderful conversation and for all the questions. And be well, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye, Quiara. Bye, Ariel.
It's Sandra.